Hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Candi Byrne. Great to see you again, Candi.
Thank you. Great to be here again.
Yeah. So Candi and I had this conversation about beliefs. So the essence is that beliefs to me seem far more bustable than trauma seems healable. We've got this trauma on the back of our relinquishment, and it's a haunting feeling. Maybe it's a haunting feeling, and we've got this belief that we're less than.
Mm-hmm.
We're not good enough, or we've got this belief that we're going to be rejected again. And obviously the trauma comes through, well, obviously maybe the trauma comes out through belief, but the belief, there's some brain stuff going on. There's some meanings, some meanings being drawn up in our head. We're coming to a conclusion here. There's some brain power involved. There's some words, there's some thoughts, there's some beliefs.
Absolutely.
And those seem more, as I say, belief seems more bustable than trauma seems healable for some reason to me. It's like an interesting kind of idea.
Okay.
And you, on the back of a conversation around that kind of stuff and healing and beliefs, you've come up with this great framework which we're going to dive into today, and we're going to explore. And it's an acronym. You've come up with an acronym. It's five letters, isn't it? Adopt.
It's 5 letters.
T. Yeah.
Right.
So which hopefully makes it easy to remember. Yeah.
But that's
But so let's dive straight in. What does the A stand for?
Well, so to go back just a little bit, I want to say that I didn't come up with this acronym. The acronym was, I got a download after listening to one of your podcasts. It was one of your solo podcasts, and you were talking about healing and what is healing? What does that mean, and how do we get there? And I as I listened to it, this thought came down to me, or this download of this acronym ADOPT. And I thought, oh, it's so perfect for adoptees. It'd be easy to remember. So the A stands for having awareness that there is another way to think about something, that we have these beliefs, as you were talking about. And beliefs to me, as I've shared with you before, my idea of beliefs are that they're a series of calcified thoughts held together with evidence. So we have these beliefs, and we believe that they're true because we've got all of this evidence showing that, for instance, we'll take the one, I'm less than, or I'm not worthy. And, we start with the initial thought of, well, I was given away, I was relinquished. The idea of the trauma of this. So that sets up this automatic foundation for this belief system. And we get, thought after thought, because we get evidence. If somebody, challenges us on something, if we were scolded, it's like, oh, because I'm not worthy because I was given away. It's deep. It's a deep taproot that we have of this belief. And so that's why it feels true. So the idea of getting to a place of healing, which is, it's, as we were talking a little bit earlier, it's not a destination, right? Being healed is not a destination. And in some ways, I think that it would be more useful to use like recovery language, because we are in recovery from this experience. And are we ever going to be fully healed? What does that even mean? Because anytime we experience a healing and awareness, it's very common in self growth, personal development, that new level, new devil, right? So every time you reach a new level, you're going to have awareness that there's something else that is triggering to you, that is causing you suffering, that it triggers a pattern in you. And it's like, oh, well, it's another friggin' growth experience, right? So, okay, so back to the ADOPT acronym. So it's the awareness, that's the A part of it. The awareness that we have beliefs that are causing us suffering, and that there is a way to dissolve those, which is the D in the ADOPT acronym.
Can I take you back to the A one just briefly, right?
Yes.
So you talked about calcified thought.
Yes.
And then you talked about, what did you say? Cemented by evidence.
By evidence, right?
Yeah. So so what I was thinking from that was this idea that what the thinker thinks, the prover proves.
Well, what the thinker proves, yes, the thinker is proving based on their perspective of what this evidence, what they're making it mean is that it's furthering that belief.
So we become, maybe this was one of where you got your download from. Maybe I was talking about mindset, because when I think of mindset, I think of concrete, right?
Yeah, sure.
And we all use this term. Not we all use it. There's a lot of people use the term mindset. When sure. I'd rather have a fluid mind. I'd prefer a mind fluid, which goes into what you were talking about, being open, not being set in our ways. Right. And a calcified thought is set, and right. Then calcified thought is set, and then you talked about cemented by evidence. This is this thing that the psychologists called their confirmation bias, which is their way of saying, or their way of their naming of this phenomenon, that the mind seems to, it looks out into the world for what it agrees with. It looks for confirmation, it looks for validation, looks for right. affirmation,
right?
And that is like the steel. That's like putting steel in the concrete. So we're not right. just talking about concrete, we're talking about reinforced concrete, which has Absolutely. Got metal running through it, and then we're doing all this internally, and we may be hanging out in spaces where everybody else is validating our stuff.
Yes.
Which just makes it more religious, and not religious. It makes it firmer. It makes it, we become more set.
Yeah. And I think religious is a thing. I mean, it becomes, not just from the actual religion sense, but it becomes our religion, particularly as it relates to intimates and anyone who's close into us. We're trying to fit in with them, right? We're trying to prove our value or our worth. We're trying to get through all of that concrete, and yet what we're picking at are the pieces that cement in. I love that idea of that, the that rebar that's in there. And there's also an equal amount of evidence to the contrary. but we're only seeing this because we figure that this is how, if we solidify within our belief, and particularly if it's a belief that's been placed upon us by family of origin, friends, colleagues, whatever, it's our ego self trying to fit us in so that we're not isolated, because that's the worst part, right? Abandonment. And so we're trying to prevent re-abandonment by fitting in with these beliefs that are usually contrary to what our inner wisdom is, that core of ourself, that that complete and perfect core of divine essence. I don't want to take it to necessarily a spiritual realm, but I will, because that's our place of integrity. That's our place of inner wisdom. And where a lot of the suffering comes from is this, we're trying to break out of our inner self, is trying to break through this concrete wall of fitting in, because it's external. We're looking at how the externals are guiding us, as opposed to how our internal core, which is our true essence, our true nature, is guiding us. And that disparity between those two is where the suffering comes from. And that's where those beliefs are, because they're placed on us externally. Shame is placed on us. We're not innately shamed. We don't come with shame. Shame is placed on us, and then we act toward that shame, because that's part of the evidence, that's part of the belief.
Yeah. And shame may come from our birth mothers, because they're going through that whole thing is a shaming experience.
Absolutely, because even if they're, it's still a societal shame, right? I mean, there are a few people who are openly carrying children without a sense of shame, but there's still, this very Bible thumping Christian, we're just a couple of generations away from, it's shameful to have someone give birth, in a non-traditional kind of way, so we're just a couple of generations away from that. So we're, the person who is pregnant at the moment has been reared and had beliefs placed on her by someone who had beliefs placed on them. Those are generational beliefs that are coming down. Those are really solid beliefs. And unless you're really strong in yourself,
unless you've got the option.
Yes.
You talked about the giving the option, so that the bit was the bit that really landed for me was it's awareness of the option. There is another
way to think. Yes.
Another way. Okay.
And it's in that way, when you are in integrity with that inner wisdom, you are at risk, and I'm using the air quotes for at risk, for being shunned from the people who have placed the beliefs on you or have helped you build those beliefs up. You're swimming upstream, right? You're a solo kind of person at that point. If you're trying to stay in integrity, you risk being ostracized by everyone within your personal, intimate belief building group, whether it's family of origin, whether it's a religious worship kind of belief, whether it's a societal, that you're in a more conservative area as opposed to a thing. That's a really hard place to stand, because you feel like you're standing alone. And it's, the core is solid, but you've got all this concrete that you have to break through in order to show people I'm standing on my own. Because shame arrows are going to be they're going to be coming at you, because it's like, we need to keep you in your place, because if you change, what's that going to mean for us? It scares the people when you're changing internally. It scares those people. Yeah.
So what's the D of the acronym then?
So I'll also say that with the A, there's also allowing. So there's the awareness that there's something different. And that itself can be scary to the person going, oh, because there's that disparity between, if I change, what is that going to mean to everybody else? How is it going to affect all of these other people? Because it's an unknown, right? It's sort of scare-sighting to stay in your own integrity, both scary and exciting to go, you know what? This is my truth, and I'm going to live my truth no matter what. So the other A is, so you've got awareness, and then you've got allowing. It's like, it's allowing this to start to become the solvent, right? That starts helping break these things down, which then does lead to the D, which is dissolving. So, our thoughts are our own. We're the only ones who can change our minds, right? I mean, people might have input, you might take their input, and it might feed our beliefs, or it might be like, oh, I don't like this at all. I don't like this part of the belief. And so therefore you can take a thought, because it's very difficult to dissolve a belief system all at once. You do it one thought at a time. You have the awareness that there's some other way of thinking. You allow that it can be a possibility for you. And then you take one thought at a time, and you look at it from all the angles, and say, and there are many tools to use to be able to dissolve that evidence. Pardon me?
Like the Byron Katie stuff.
Byron Katie stuff is absolutely brilliant. And there are other, definitely other ways that help with once you have the awareness and the allowing, sometimes all it takes is just that bit of allowing, and it starts to be what my coaching mentor calls wiggling the tooth. And it's when a tooth is loose, sometimes you'll just yank it out, right? And that's got its own thing. But sometimes you just wiggle just a little bit. And with that wiggling, and it might be just the barest little percentage, that's going to start dissolving the hold that thought that cement. It's going to start poking a hole in that, and that's where that belief system starts to really crumble. And again, it can be scary, because it's like, I have believed this to be true my whole life. I have believed that I am not worthy, unlovable. I've got all this evidence to prove it, and yet, look, when I look at this, I go, this thought, it's not true, or something else could be true when I look at this. And I think about this in the way of, if you put a big clock on the ground, like a traditional looking clock, 12, 6, 3, 9, and you're standing in the center. If you have only ever looked at 12 o'clock, you believe that that's your only way of looking at things. And then, through this wiggle, you start moving towards 1 o'clock. Your perspective of everything else in that whole 360 degrees starts changing. You may see a little bit of 12 o'clock out of your area, but now you see, oh, look, there's a 2 o'clock over there. And then, and you don't even know that there's 6 behind you, the 6 o'clock behind you. So it's this, as you take each one of these thoughts, you're opening up to a much broader, a more 360 degree view of the way that things could be. That's what happens when you start dissolving those thoughts. And because you are standing in the middle, you're where the clock hands come together. That's your core. That's that solid inner wisdom core. And from that, once you loosen up, that core is going to, when you work your core, you're gonna be able to get that whole range, or see a much broader range of opportunity. And that's what comes from the dissolving thoughts. Yeah. I feel like you want to say something.
Yeah. So the wiggling bit is almost starts with maybe just having a suspicion that a thought might not be true. You're kind of curious, you're exploring it. Is that true? And
that's the awareness. Yes, that's the awareness part, that it could be something different.
It could be something different, yeah. And this Byron Katie's work stuff, I think it's thework.org, isn't it, or something like that. We'll put that. I'll put a note on the show notes, because she has this 4-step process, which allows you.
It's 4 questions, and then there's a second part of it, and it's the second part that really anchors in the dissolving part of thoughts. Yeah. So
the other thing about dissolving, so you had 2 A's, you had 2 words for A. You had allow. What did you have?
Awareness and allowing.
Yeah. So your word for D was dissolving or dissolution. The other thing that came to me was you had this download of this adopt acronym was a download. So it was something that came to you or came through you. Didn't come. It wasn't your creation.
No, it's not my. No, not at all.
It's a big, yeah. So that's what I think are that download can be a new idea. Like your download was a new idea. Absolutely. But about how to set
a new perspective, right? Yeah, it was a new perspective. Yeah.
And we could be getting downloads about new beliefs as well, couldn't we? That a new thought could come in to blow the old one out of the water.
We are getting downloads and signs all the time. It's the A part of it. It's having the awareness and allowing the fact that you're going to respond to that. Excuse me, respond to the download, respond to seeing a sign. And we can resist it. I mean, that's a part of it. I was thinking about this morning, and there's a shadow side to this adopt acronym. So the shadow side is staying within our, within the current way. And the A's for that are to avoid thinking that there's something else, or to assign blame to others. And the D is to dig in to your, rather than being expansive, you're just really digging into your, these beliefs, because it's too scary otherwise. So instead of being allowing that, when you get a message and you're like, because inner critic is going to go, oh, don't listen to that. Oh, no, that's stupid. Or, that's not going to work for you. You've tried that before. You're not worth making changes in your life. So those aren't downloads. That is our internal system protecting us.
Yeah.
From being hurt. I mean, it feels, the inner critic can be really critical. And we feel that inner critic's words are true, and those thoughts are true. And it adds to that, to those, to the evidence, right? It's because inner critic is going to call out every bit of the evidence and go, did you forget about this? Did you forget about this? And that's that shame language coming, because the shame is the way to keep us the same. Shame keeps us the same rather than growing. Ego has no interest at all in our personal growth. Ego does not want us to grow. Ego wants us to be safe. And this is how it thinks it's going to keep us safe, by don't change anything, because, that's going to that's going to cause your whole world to fall apart. Don't change a thing. So when the don't change a thing message comes, ego is in there. And when you get a download, it's like, oh, I don't know where that came from. But, we ignore it. But spirit doesn't stop sending us the messages. That's the good part. That's the like, oh, thank you, Jesus. I'm just saying that as being funny, but the messages never stop coming to us. Messages come through songs that we hear. Messages come from nature. Like when you see an animal come to you multiple times, like go and look up, what it means when you see a deer 25 times or you run into a deer. What does that mean? It's being curious. It's the curious part of it.
So what's the O in your acronym?
So the O is to orient towards your inner wisdom, toward that pure, perfect core. You are whole and perfect. And that's the download zone, right? Is like, and when you orient to that, to your internal voice, and that it's almost a protective core for you, different than the protection. And again, I'm using air quotes that ego does. This is your true. This is where, and it's a calm voice. It's not going to be all, it's a very calm, measured, this is the way to go. And it's always there. And we need to, quiet our minds. We've heard this all. It seems almost cliche to say, but you do need to calm your mind in order to hear that. And that core works with your body. So when you pay attention to body sensations, that's your inner self talking to you. So orient to that. And it's particularly important when you're at something like a family dinner, or you're in an argument with your boss or something. It's like, that's trigger zone, right? And so taking that breath to bring yourself to, okay, what's the truest part of me? That's the truest part of you. And you may still get triggered, but at least you've got the awareness. You're allowing that you've been triggered. And then you can continue to do, dissolving. You can continue on the thought work. This is like a feedback loop. It's not a once and done. It's not a straight path. It's say, oh, I got triggered. Let me go into my inner self. And from that position of in the no shame zone, in just the clear purity, let me take a look at this situation and see what it was. Where is there still some belief glue? Where is there still, a pattern that gets triggered? Then you're like, oh, okay, I see that. And then you process, right? Which is part of the P. You go, so once you orient to your internal self, then you go to the processing part, which is where a lot of us, we go from, okay, I was triggered, and then I'm going to try and fix it or put up a boundary. And it's like, but you've missed the part about processing this, because it's still within you. And so there needs to be a way that you process what you have felt. And then the other part of the P is to plant positive thoughts. Take look for plant your own positive thoughts, right? I mean, if you've had other people planting shame on you, what seeds of positivity can you plant? And it just may be, you know what, I made my bed today. You know what, I drank an extra glass of water today. It again, it's just that it's the wiggle in reverse. So you're just, you're taking one little step. And of course, inner critic is going to say, well, that's not enough. You think that's going to change you? You think, you might give it up now, sister. That one glass of water, what's that going to do for you? But it does. It's incremental. And I'll tell this little story about incremental changes. A friend of mine love the kind of salt that you put on popcorn at the movie theater. And so she discovered that when she goes to McDonald's, like in those little teeny tiny packets of salt, it's the same kind of salt. So rather than going out and buying, a container of salt, she started taking these little packets and putting them into like a small Tupperware container, little plastic container. And she said, I realized that, each of those packets held only a few grains, but over time, the more packets that she opened, the more it built up. And so I look at building the positive thoughts in that same way. It might be one little grain, but it's like a garden where your garden is just full of weeds, right? So you pull some weeds, but then they grow back. And if you start planting other seeds, other plants in there, and sometimes you plant annuals, sometimes you plant a perennial, you don't know, it might work, it might take root, it might not. It might take a while to crowd out those negative thoughts, but then you've got more positive thoughts to draw on. And then you can create a new belief system that is based on, this mind flow that you talk about, where it's like, oh, it's not concrete. It's a beautiful scaffolding, which is, it supports you. And maybe instead of tall, it's wide. So however you build your own particular scaffolding or plant your garden. But that's the P in there, is to process. That is so important, to process the thoughts after you orient to your internal self. And then the T, and again, this is the path. I mean, you end up at T, which is transformation. Is that being healed? I don't know, but you've been transformed from where you started on this. And hopefully, ideally you would move to the T that is transmutation, which is, in alchemy, it's creating the gold out of the lead, right? So that it would be, it is so far from what you started with, and that you can see the gold in whatever circumstance that caused you suffering in the first place, or that held up these beliefs. Because there's always something, there's always at least one thing you can take out of the circumstance. Can't change the circumstance, but you can change everything after that. You can change the thoughts, which will then change your feelings, which will then change your actions, which then change the results of everything. That's a very common cognitive behavioral therapy kind of process. So that's adopt, and it's all, it all sort of weaves it's through that each part of it supports the rest of it.
Yeah.
Easy. It's simple, but not easy.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. It can be easy. It can be like, oh my God, I've had this thought all my life, and I know it to not be true. And, I'm going to draw a picture of it, burn it up. That's the processing. And I'm going to move on and plant some new thoughts. So
the thing I was coming to my mind, you talking about behavior and you're talking about that flow. Like I was thinking about mindset, the opposite is we're set in our beliefs, and that makes us set in our ways.
Yes.
So when you say we're set in our ways, that's talking about behavior. That's about what we do.
We do in reaction to our thoughts, which
what we do, or what we do, how we engage with others, or how we don't engage with others.
Exactly.
So there's this idea that we're going upstream of the behavior to our feelings, upstream of our feelings to our thoughts, and then that central thought, that central belief of us adoptees, of us being less than, and then we have a download about that, and at the moment, I'm talking a lot, reminding people that the Thriving Adoptees logo is a diamond for a reason.
Yes, exactly.
It's for a reason. It's the alternative to the you started by talking about awareness of an alternative. So instead of thinking of ourselves as a piece of garbage that's been tossed away, and at one extreme, we are a diamond, and the metaphor is great in some respects. It's about our brilliance, it's about our sparkle, but every metaphor kind of runs out of steam, right? So what's great about a diamond is that a value, but a diamond's value is set by a market. You know, there's a market for diamonds.
Yes.
Whereas our value, all our value, is infinite. It's money can't buy it. So that's kind of when the diamond runs out of steam. We're talking about the finite value of a diamond, whereas versus our infinite value. And this is kind of the flip side for me of that low self-worth, low self-esteem, confused about our identity. This confusion, this identity thing is a many-layered metaphor.
Yeah.
But I'm saying no, that diamond is who we are. That diamond that's been veiled, hidden by our trauma.
Well, and our story of trauma, because we set up, there's sort of a what do I want to say? So if adoption were traumatic in all circumstances, everybody would have the same experience of it.
And it would be 24 hours. It would be 24 hours a day.
It would. I mean, and it also sets up the idea that if we had been retained or raised by our biological creators, that we would have a better life. And is that true? I know a lot of people who were raised by the people who created them, the woman who gave birth to them, and they've had some really crappy experiences. You could read memoir after memoir, and about people who were raised by these horrible parents. So the idea that it's sort of a fundamental idea that if we were kept by the biological people, our lives would have been different, which is true, but it would have been better, because it would prove that we were lovable or worth it or whatever. And knowing the people that I know who have had some difficulties with it, a lot of difficulties, I know people who were raised by their biological parents and wished that they were adopted because it would have been a better life for them. So we're, this premise that adoption itself is a trauma, which I'm not saying that there isn't trauma around the experience, but this is a belief that we have. The adoption trauma is a belief that we continue to feed, and there may be parts of it that are true, that there's a biological, the pre-verbal kind of things and feeling the abandonment and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that is not a true experience, because it does happen. And it's up to us, because we also know adoptees who don't experience trauma, or at least they're not exhibiting a trauma. They're not laying everything on this belief of, they're not wearing the cement suit of I'm not worthy because I'm adopted.
Yeah.
So.
And there seems to be, if there's an intermediary factor at play, causing our experience in any one moment, right? So we can go from dark despair to happiness in the blink of an island. So there's an intermediary factor at play all the time. You know, it's
all
not
the time. That's our human experience, right? Yeah,
that's our human experience.
Yeah, is up and down.
And that's well, that's our level of consciousness, right? That's the intermediate factor.
Yes, our consciousness, which is informed by our external experiences, if we allow that, right? It's that we're swimming in the externals, and I mean, we do have a human experience if we come from that still core of our integrity. We're still going to have experiences. We're going to experience them from our integrity, which is that place without stories. Now, you know, enlightened beings do that. Is that going to be, you know, something that we experience every day, every moment of our life? No. But the more often that we turn inward and experience life from that perspective, the more it's going to stop that dramatic sort of despair to this. It won't stop that, but it'll stop us from getting stuck in that. Because when there's despair, if we come to that despair and we've got all of our concrete belief thoughts, we're going to stay down in despair, right? Because that's what we deserve. From if we're outside of our integrity, if we're in that inner core, then we're like, whew, I'm feeling despair, and this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And then you don't get stuck there. It's an experience. It's part of the human experience, and you process it. You orient inside and you process that feeling. And it might be feeling sad, but we have the biological reaction to emotions, to feelings, right? But they only last like 90 seconds. But we feel like if we're going to be sad, we can't let ourselves cry, because we're going to cry forever. We will never stop crying. We will feel sad for the rest of our lives. That's a story you can tell yourself. And people, because they've got evidence, yes, when I feel sad, or when I saw my mother feeling sad, she was sad for her whole life. And so we're like, we're not going to let ourselves be that way. Whereas it's like, I feel sad right now. I feel really sad. I'm crying. I feel it going through my body. And then you move on to whatever's next. Again, simple, not easy.
But most kids do that. They recover faster.
Yeah.
They recover faster from their emotions. It's more compartmentalized. It's not. They bounce back quicker.
They do, until they're about 8 years old, right? Which then we start laying shame on them. It's right around 8 to 10, 12 years old, where that's when we start internalizing shame. Before that, we're biological beings. We cry when we're hungry, tired, need our diaper changed, and like, if all adults acted like toddlers, in the grocery store, when a toddler was hot, wearing itchy something, and just wanted something on the shelf, if we reacted the way that they did, what would happen? We'd get hauled away. We'd get shamed. Oh my God, what is that person doing? And a child, who do we shame? We shame the parents. We don't shame the kid. Right? So but the parent is like, oh my God, you've got to be quiet. We're telling the kid, don't pay attention to your feelings. Your feelings are not valid. That's when that's the human condition, unless you're in a very permissive thing.
So I just had a download there. Something landed for me really big. I've been shaming my emotions.
Say more.
Well, the one that perhaps the easiest one to understand, the easiest example, is worrying about worrying. So I didn't used to do that. So this is, yeah. Before I had any awareness of different options, I was just, my experience was my experience. And then when I went down this, started down this path, whenever it was 16 years ago, become aware that I become aware that there's a better way, there's a different way. And then I've been judging my emotions in a way that I never did before.
Mm. And is there someone in your life who did judge those emotions?
I think every parent does.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw something in the swimming pool. They don't judge the emotions, but they're trying to. As adults, have you ever seen anybody telling? Have you ever seen anybody? Has anybody ever told you to calm down, and you've thought, "Yes, that's a really good idea. I will calm down," and felt calm?
Right, exactly. Oh, thanks so much. I would never have thought about that.
Thank you.
Your parents.
Yeah.
And F you,
And yet, all parents do that. I take a lot of my, I see a lot of my human parent to child interaction in the swimming pool, right? And especially in the swimming pool changing room. So the kids having a meltdown for some reason, and the dad is trying to logic them out of a meltdown.
Right.
So like a stereotypical dad and lad, dad and boy, right? Would be he's trying to logic them out, and then stereotypical mum and son is trying to soothe them out of it.
Yeah.
But
rather than allowing them to feel their feelings. And it's quite possible that out in public they treat them differently, so that that then is a mixed message. It's like, okay, at home it's like, okay, if you're going to cry, I'm just going to let you cry it out, and you'll cry yourself to sleep, kind of thing. But out in public, right, then you get shamed if you're the parent whose kid is acting in a way that is not permissible or not acceptable out in public. Like they're, oh, I'm going to get shamed, and it's even an unconscious kind of thing. It's like, shh, 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 shh. Being on a plane with a baby, like, oh my gosh, I feel for those parents, because it's like, and people get upset, it's like, can't you shut that kid up? Don't you think I would if I could? I also do not want to sit here and listen to as the parent, you can just feel their tension, which is all energy. And of course, the child is feeling that energy, and it's
so how
that energy.
So how does this play into us then? I was doing a podcast with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about validation. And what came to me is the invalidation of feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So trauma comes up, mum has no idea of trauma because they didn't have the training. Tries to soothe the trauma, or tries to logic the trauma, and rather than accepting it and just saying nothing and being there until the trauma runs its course. It's 90 seconds, as you say. And I heard that stuff. I had something about that the other week in reading a neuroscience book. Yeah, it's the half-life of a feeling is 90 seconds.
Yeah. So allowing that, having the energy of allowing that, even within ourselves, and it can be allowing it can mean that we need to process it. So if we feel a feeling and then we try to outthink that feeling, right? That's where suffering comes in. If we're like, I feel angry, so I'm going to, well, people don't have phone books anymore, but back in the day, tear up a phone book. I'm going to, I have a big djembe drum. And when I'm feeling anger, I'll go and I'll bang on that drum for a couple of minutes and it goes through me. And then it gets to a point where, so the biological part of it, which we cannot control, that biology, that when we get triggered, we're going to get a biological whoosh of anger at something. And then that's the reaction. And then I'll go and bang on the drum. And then I can come back with my response. Because that's orient towards inward, but you've got to process the feeling, because otherwise it just sticks around and you're trying to outthink it, negotiate it. And it's like, no, if you're going to cry, just cry. And, cry like it's your job to cry.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
I mean, really let it go, because how long can you hold on to that sobbing, right? Like at some point it just becomes hilarious, right?
Yeah. Cry like you're going for an Oscar.
Yes, exactly. All of the things, like really go dramatic for it, but allow it to go through and then move on. So go throw a ball, go pound the ground as you walk in nature. I mean, now, see, here's the thing. We need to process the negative things. We don't often process the positive feelings. Like they go past us. Like negative feelings are Velcro, positive feelings are Teflon, right? Because the negative ones theoretically, protect us more. So when we have a really great feeling, like you saw a rainbow earlier, and let me take that in. Let me take that in for 90 seconds. But what comes in is our, Protestant work ethic. It's like, oh, well, that's a waste of time to just look at the rainbow kind of thing, right? So, and how do we process joy? How do we, so we need to process all of our feelings. Because that builds up our, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. But it builds up our it's like an artist building a body of work, right? So we build up the way of, okay, I know when I feel angry, this is how I can process, and then it'll go through, and then I can, sit with that. When a wonderful thing happens, I pet my cat and, oh, it just feels so good. Like, let me sit with that and process that. It's all about the processing. That's the key. Turn inward, process. You're good to go.
Good to go.
Literacy, that's the word that I'm looking for. Emotional literacy. So, you build up your literacy of how to process what comes up for you. And it's great to work on the small ones. Like I say, that's the wiggle. Like if you can change, like airplanes, when they set their autopilot, let's say you're flying across the Atlantic, and if a pilot changes their direction, even by 1 degree, they're not going to end up where they initially thought they were going to end up, just 1 degree. So that's the same kind of thing. It's that awareness of, okay, let me try it, because why not try it? If you're in pain, if you're in suffering, and all the things that you've done, it's like, oh, here we go again, kind of thing. It's like, why wouldn't you try? Like, prove it wrong, right? Prove it wrong.
Brilliant. Thanks, Candi. That's been beautiful. Really enjoyed it. A hell of a download you had there.
Oh my gosh. I feel so blessed, it's and what happens sometimes when I get those downloads, it's like, who me? Who am I to get this download? And that's a reaction, right? So I'm like, who am I not? Everybody gets downloads, so why not me?
Good on you. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks, Candi. Take care. Bye-bye.